Well, hello and welcome to Automation Talk, where you have the opportunity to see and hear live what's happening here at Automation Direct. If this is your first time logging into Automation Talk, we welcome you and thank you for coming in today. My name is Shane Kreider, and I'm the host, as I usually am here on Automation Talk. Well, today joining me to help put on this presentation is Tom Olosky, and he's my sidekick and partner in crime, and helps me come up with all these seminars, and we try to put these on and give our customers the best information we can possibly can through our Automation Talk show. This is Ethernet Communications. You signed up for it, so you should know what it is, but if not...
We can get started on this on the opening slide here and everything, Shane. If I can jump in.
Go ahead.
Basically, we're going to cover all our products that have some form of Ethernet capability. Now,
Right.
That might be the standard Ethernet where you're communicating protocol or programming from a PC to a PLC or a PAC. We got to start using the word PAC
That's
nowadays.
a tough one. Yep.
That's our newest product, the Productivity 3000. We'll talk about that a little bit today. But also we're going to cover the Ethernet capability when it comes to our Seymour HMI panels and also our Stride Ethernet unmanaged type switches. We'll talk about them a little bit. And there's also capability with ERMs and EBCs, and I'm going to pass that off to Shane because he's kind of the expert in that area.
I don't understand this lingo of ERMs and EBCs.
I think we'll explain them,
Okay.
or you'll explain them. And we'll also talk a little bit about the GS and Durapulse type drives and the addition of a GS, what is it, a GS
E-drive.
E-drive to it that allows
more
it to
lingo.
be on RS, not RS 485, but Ethernet.
Ethernet. Ethernet's the way to go. Yeah, you don't want to go serial communications unless you have to.
And we're going to discuss a little bit about the advantages of Ethernet in
Over serial. Yeah, we'll actually show some examples.
Okay.
The slide there says Ethernet communications. We had done the Ethernet seminars way back, I think we stopped in like 2007. Bruce Perry over in tech support would do them with me. And it was Ethernet PLC communications. And that's all we covered was just the PLCs, but we've launched so many new products with more than just PLCs. So Tom and I are going to try to cover everything today, as you can see on the slide.
I think I'll bring it up. We're going to touch base on that a couple times, but the original Ethernet was classified as 10 base T, meaning 10,000 megabits per second. The newer rate is 100. Some of the equipment we're going to be covering is rated at both 10 and 100. And we do still have some products, and we'll try to point those out that only communicate at the 10, with like the GS drive, the GS E-drive
Right.
interface card.
Well, sometimes it's not necessary for faster speeds on some of the products. I mean, the Ethernet makes it nice and easy for communications and talking, but as far as speeds go, some devices aren't, as critical. And like Tom says, used to we had, and I even noticed when I was laying the products out, I even ran across some of our older. For instance, an ECOM, which is just an Ethernet communications module. Sorry, I'm sitting on the wrong side of the studio. This is the first time I've ever sat on this side
today.
So I'm going to look at the wrong camera way too many times. But bear with me. Yeah, our old ones were just like this 205 Ethernet communications. It's a H2-ECOM. And the old ones just say H2-ECOM. When I picked it up, I was laying stuff out. Whoa, that's an old one. The new ones say H2-ECOM 100, which will do 10 base or 100 base.
And it automatically senses the differences coming through the Ethernet cable. The other thing I like to point out real quick we're going to talk about is not everything we're going to talk about today with an Ethernet cable is strictly Ethernet type protocol and communications. Some of the things we'll talk about use Ethernet cable to actually do remote I/O.
Right. Okay, next slide. Tom.
Introduction. The industrial Ethernet today, according to Automation World, actually this year is still the fastest growing wire-based or wireline type infrastructure that's used in industry.
I think the reason why is because it's so common that most, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's sort of an open protocol. It's not a proprietary communication, so pretty much anybody can create, write or get the drivers and put it into their products. So it's a nice protocol that'll go across different manufacturers' products. So not only will it work with ours, it'll work with brand X, brand Y, brand Z. So that's why.
The other thing, the seminar we're going to have today, we're going to try to cover all the Automation Direct products, including the PLCs, the switches, and the drives that make use of Ethernet, Ethernet protocol, and Ethernet type cabling and wiring. And we're also still going to do the little demo with the serial Ethernet that Shane was showing me earlier that was kind of impressive to me because I'd never seen it before.
Some of those hidden links in DirectSoft that we never knew existed until we had to. All right. The agenda, like I said, we're just going to go over everything, technical overview of some of the PLC stuff, the industrial stuff, and then common communications amongst the products. We'll do a quick demonstration on the Productivity 3000 Ethernet on just how easy it is to connect up with it, and then I'll open up DirectSoft and show you how to create Ethernet links with it. Actually serial link as well, and then the difference in the speeds of serial versus Ethernet. And then we've got some actually customer examples in here. We haven't done these in a while. It's tough to get customers to cough up some of their examples. So if you actually have some examples you want to send us on any of this stuff, yeah, feel free to send it to us, and our marketing department can always use it, and we'll give you something back for free.
Yep.
And then we'll have some information we can pass on to help you out with this stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Little bit in the uses of Ethernet, and I think we've already talked about this, but here's kind of a quick. Don't try to wire to this graphic we have up here. It's just a pictorial representation of
But it's a
all
nice
the devices. It's a nice one. Actually, one of our graphic artists just completed this for us yesterday. But we're going to cover programming by way of Ethernet. We're also going to cover Ethernet remote I/O and networking between PLCs, peer-to-peer. Also the CMOR, which gets into operator interfaces, and we'll talk a little bit about the drives. And also we'll mention that Ethernet's good for SCADA type systems to collect data.
Okay.
Jump too quick?
Yeah, jump back.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, remote I/O real quick. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, do we go into some slides that actually dive down deep into the remote I/O, or we're just going to sort of...
I think we're going to wing that on the a little bit on the demo or something.
Okay, all right. Well, some of the stuff we're mentioning, we say ERMs, EBCs, a lot of customers might not know what it is. But for remote I/O, used to, if you're, excuse me, if you're not familiar with Koyo or Direct Logic or Automation Direct, which is all the same stuff, our remote I/O used to, if you had, let's say, a 205 rack, which is one of these nice racks here, and I'll make sure I don't get myself shocked, or I'll try not to, but a 205 rack, it's one of the most popular. We've been selling these for years. But when you ran out of space in the 205, the only way you could get more rack was to use serial remote I/O. Now, we have a solution for that now on the newer stuff. You can actually do expansion racks. Yep. But serial remote would allow you to run long distances, but like I said, it was a 2-wire with a ground, twisted shielded cable.
The hardest part of that was actually the configuration and trying to set up the all the I/O that point you had to account for everything to get it into the
you had to write
ladder
code
logic,
for
right?
everything. Then you had to have spec cable and resistors, and if you didn't have everything just perfect and you didn't hold your mouth right, it wouldn't work. And there was worksheets you actually had to plug in how many I/O you had, how many slave racks you had, where each module, and so forth. And so you got to, I mean, it worked great. Once it was working, but just the time that you had to spend on it to get it to work. And then, I don't know, it's probably been 7 years maybe, they came out with Ethernet remote I/O. And we'll show you the demo on here, how much easier it is. And what's funny is when they first came out with the Ethernet remote I/O, it came out before the DirectSoft 5, which has iBoxes, or intelligent boxes.
Okay. Yep.
So when they first came out with Ethernet remote I/O, it's easier, or it was easier at the time, to set up analog in a slave rack than it was to set up analog in your main rack. Because with Ethernet remote I/O, you could just say, okay, here's my analogs. It saw it, and you say, okay, here's the memory addresses I want it to log to.
Well,
and it was set up.
Yeah, actually, I remember taking a couple calls from a couple customers the time I was on tech support with you that the customer had an application where it involved a lot of analog type cards, and the easy solution was actually to put all the analog cards in the remote rack and have more or less automatic setup on the cards.
So yeah, that's a little bit on the remote I/O stuff. Now PLC to PLC networking, you can still do serial. If you want to do RS-485 or 422, But there's some drawbacks on it, but there's also some drawbacks on the Ethernet. But what's nice with Ethernet is it's not as susceptible to noise as some of the others are, the serials are.
Very true.
Ethernet is pretty much plug and go, and Ethernet cable, I'm sure I'm going to unplug this, and something's going to flip out here, but I'm going to do it anyway. Ethernet cable, if you've been into any of the big box stores, if you've been into, the discount stores, if you've been into a drugstore, you've probably seen an Ethernet cable.
Hardware stores sell it.
Gas stations sell them. You get any new products, typically they throw one or two in there. If you have a computer, you know what it is. Ethernet, it's RJ480 or RJ45, RJ45 connector. And you can make them yourself. Actually, some of the home improvement stores sell the tools. You can get them at Radio Shack, stuff like that, and make them yourself. But
it's like 8 conductors.
Right, and we'll show the difference in the wiring, how much easier it is to wire one of these than it is serial as well. But for doing PLC to PLC communications, it's pretty much plug up to the PLC, and you can go to a hub. You don't have to, but you can go to hubs, broadcast out. Tom's got a lot of nice hubs there, but some of the pictures.
I was going to kind of highlight the our newer Stride unmanaged switches, and real quick, if you want to know the difference between a hub and a switch, basically any kind of packet of data that comes into a hub is actually rebroadcast out to all the ports on the hub, whereas a switch, it actually has some intelligence, and basically anything coming in, once it knows where it's being routed to, it remembers that, so the next time it gets it out there to whatever that device is. But besides that, it also does not broadcast to devices that don't need that information, which gets the throughput up there for you and everything.
So it didn't clog up the network.
And real quick since I have the Stride here in hand, we also have Stride in 2 different versions. There's the original plastic case. I don't have the specs in front of me, but it was like 50 degrees C on the max, and then we came out with a metal housing that gets you up to, I think it's 55 degrees C. But we have them in 5-port, 8-port, 9-port, also fiber optic. We talk Ethernet, we talked RJ45, but fiber optic is used quite extensively for the same protocol that's transmitted over the lines.
You can longer distances with the fiber optic, but it's going to cost you a lot for your cabling and for installation.
True.
Okay, HMI to PLC communications, there again, Ethernet. What's nice about that is just a quick example, especially, let's just use this for example. We've got a 260 CPU in this 205. Well, if we were using serial communications to a touch panel, like one behind my head back there, looks like a window back there, I think so large, then you're going to take up one of your ports, right? So that leaves you one port for that, for the HMI, and one port for communicating to your computer for programming. Well, that's it. You just hogged up all the ports you had. Well, if you have Ethernet, I can go from, say this is, actually, there's my ECOM down here on the end. I can go from this ECOM to a hub, and I can go out to multiple panels. I can still communicate to my PC with it. I can communicate to other devices as well if I need to. So I could network out to some other stuff as well. So it makes life easier and cheaper.
Plus, again, reinitiate the fact with lower noise susceptibility using Ethernet versus serial cables, plus increase in distances.
And we're probably going to hit some of these same topics again and again, but we'll try to. If we get to the slide, then we'll skip over it. But I keep referring to this 205. The 205 here, I've actually got 2 Ethernet devices in it. I've got the CPU, which is all serial, but then I've got an ERM, which is the Ethernet Remote Master.
What's that stand for?
Ethernet Remote Master.
Master, okay.
It's an H2-ERM. The H means Host Engineering developed it.
One of our partners.
The 2 means it's for a 205 rack, and then the ERM. And also I have an H2-ECOM 100 down here. Now this 100 is actually going to a hub and all kinds of other stuff. Excuse me. Our newer products, like the Productivity 3000, which is actually a pack. We've got some on the table, one there and one behind Tom. But
reach this one over here.
If you'll notice, Tom's going to hold it up. Mr. Camera Guy, TJ. If you notice, the CPU actually has Ethernet, USB, everything built onto the CPU itself. So you don't have to buy an extra card out in the rack. So if you look at cost savings, when you first look at a Productivity 3000, you'll be like, well, that CPU is a little expensive, but you're saving yourself a lot of money on communications, and you're not hogging up a slot out in your rack. You have
this real quick. Up here we have USB, Here's our Ethernet. We also use an Ethernet type port for
Remote I/O.
Remote I/O, as Shane said, and we also have 2 additional USB ports. And on top of that, we have this little green plug over here. That's an RS-485, which would be serial, and above it is a RJ12 type jack, which would be RS-232.
Yep. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we're probably going to hit some of this stuff again and again. Well, serial PLC communications was the original. Ethernet didn't come out. Did we pull that slide out, the Ethernet of the history of Ethernet? We still got it in there.
I think it's still in there.
Okay, we'll get to it then. I won't jump that far ahead. But most common configurations include the PLC to PLC, to device serial, and then PC to PLC. And trust me, you can still use, standard serial communications to your PC for programming. I mean, easy way to go. You don't have to use. And some of our PLCs, that's all they support. Say 105, that's all it has.
Yep. Our newer Click is strictly
right. No
serial
Ethernet
port.
capabilities.
Correct.
Yep. And it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just Ethernet makes life a little easier, and it's faster. But in some applications, it doesn't matter. And then you can see down at the bottom there. But you also you can see our little example of the 205 going out to slaves. And go to the next slide there, Tom. Can you see the hodgepodge of wiring? Can you imagine sitting out on the plant floor trying to wire up all this with a soldering iron and the DB connectors?
It takes a little. I mean, basically that's very similar to the serial remote I/O that originally was available on the DL205 product line.
Now you see all the specs for it. Now the plus side is you have long, your 3,300 foot. So you have, but when you max that out, that's it. You're done.
Yep.
But you got 232, 485, 422, and you see all the specs there. Go on to the next slide. Ethernet communications. There we go.
There's your history.
It was actually developed for by Xerox, and I don't remember. Yeah, if the name was on there.
Were you around then? Okay.
Hey. If you go out and do a Google search for Ethernet, you'll pop up all kinds of stuff, but you can find the history of it. It was pretty interesting, some of the terminology and why they actually came up with this. But it was Xerox had, I believe they said they had a common printer in the office, and they needed a way for everybody to
share it.
Right. So that's how it came about.
Actually, I was there when that happened. I, at one time in my career, was a Novell network administrator. Everything was IBM token ring with coax cables and T's and terminators and everything. And then all of a sudden we realized, we actually had in the office area a bunch of twisted pair of wires that ran to everybody's office with telephone. There were some spares in there, and all of a sudden we saw Ethernet, and we started using network interface cards and PCs back to a mainframe, and we were able to utilize that twisted pair wire that eventually we became to known as Ethernet protocol.
Cool. Okay. Speeds. You can see the specs on the speeds. It's a little bit faster. Distances. The thing about distances, we don't have that in the spec on the slide, but one of the things about distance, what is it? It's 100 meters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I forget what the conversion is, a couple hundred feet.
300 and some feet.
But that's the distance on Ethernet. But if you need to go further than that, you can use a repeater or a hub switch, and you can actually tag off of that again.
Keep going.
Right. Okay, next slide. Industrial communications.
In that regards, one of the advantages of Ethernet and everything, I mean, there are some air checking and everything with serial type communications, but Ethernet allows more air checking. There's more redundancy and sending packets of information to higher speed. The cost, lower cost, because you're dealing with a twisted pair type wire, small gauge, and there's easier connectivity with the serial type connection, even though in our case with our serial connectors we use RJ12, which is pretty straightforward. It's very similar to the RJ45, but when you start getting into serial type connections with DB9 type connectors and you have to wire them up, it gets a little more complicated.
Okay. Next slide, what do we got? Well,
basically we're just showing some of the two variations of Ethernet, and the only reason I think we bring this up is
We're just trying to show how easy it is versus the serial. You
Yeah.
saw the wiring configuration for serial. The Ethernet is pretty straightforward. You've got straights and crossovers.
Sometimes it gets a little confusing. I guess the best way for me to try to remember, if I'm sitting here with one of our ECOMs in a PC, and I'm trying to communicate to the ECOM to do some programming to the PC, and I want to go direct because maybe I don't have a hub or a switch, then I need a crossover.
Right.
If I do have a hub out there and I go from the PC, that would be a straight connection out to the hub or switch.
Right.
We'll call it a switch like our stride switches. Then another straight cable to go from the switch back to the ECOM on the switch. Or in the case of the Productivity 3000, I can plug directly into my CPU.
Right. Okay. Well, products. So we've got the Productivity 3000. We've got the Stride Ethernet switches. The Seymour, like what's behind me. Now, real quick on the Seymour. Any of our Seymour panels, not all of them, we have some lower end, but used to on some of our older HMIs, you could put Ethernet on them, but it was an optional card that you had to purchase and put on the panel.
Yeah.
Now with, I would say about 80 to 90% of our Seymour panels, if you buy the panel, it's already built into the panel. And so if you weigh it out, it was actually, we sell these panels are cheaper than our old ones are, and they actually have the Ethernet capabilities
yep.
built in. So save yourself some time and money all at the same time.
And continuing, we're showing the EBCs and ERMs, and we're going to talk about them a little bit. And again, the drives with the eDrive interface card, and we don't want to forget our terminator line either.
The cool blue stuff. Now, we talked about ERMs. What does ERM stand for? What does EBC stand for?
You're the expert in that area.
No, I'm not.
Okay, if I have to guess, EBC is Ethernet Base Controller.
Pretty
That's
close.
right?
Yep.
And ERM is an Ethernet Remote Master.
Yep.
Okay, I'm learning.
So yeah, an ERM is a master, and it has to talk to a slave, which is an EBC.
Okay.
I'm not sure what examples we'd put out here, and I apologize. I jump around on some of these slides that I forget which ones are which. But the EBCs can be used for multiple things. Like, for instance, I've got a master rack in my hand here, on my leg, and a slave rack in my hand. This actually has an EBC, and my ERM is going out to one of the stride switches, and it's talking to an EBC. Okay. So this rack sees this one as a slave. Now, the EBC actually goes in the same slot that a processor or CPU would go in. And but the EBCs don't have to only talk to ERMs. You could use these in a different application where you were using some kind of computer-based control, like Think and Do, or PC-based control, like Think and Do or something like that. You'd have your computer talking directly to the PLC hardware, and you'd use an EBC for that.
Okay, the one thing I think is really nice is I can be sitting here with a DL205 with let's say a 260 CPU with an ERM,
right?
Correct?
Correct.
And I can talk out to a remote base
Yep.
with an EBC module in it through a hub or a switch,
right?
Probably a switch. But in this case, it's a remote D2 type I/O rack. But I can also use the terminator, which is Shane is holding over here. So I can use field I/O, which is nice because I can stack that up all over the place and actually hang that out there and be talking the 260 CPU out to it.
Right. The EBCs, we offer those in flavors of the 205, the 405, and the terminator. So yes, an ERM, an Ethernet Remote Master, which we make those in 205s and 405s.
Okay.
An ERM can talk to a 205, a 405, or a terminator, or all above at the same time. You can use all of those out in your rack. So,
and again, everything's interconnected with relatively inexpensive Ethernet type cable.
Yep. The eDrives, and then what was the last one we had there? We have the Terminator I/O. Terminator sort of dumb I/O. There's no CPU to put in those, but there's all kinds of different communications, and one of them is the Ethernet. Okay.
And this next slide just shows a little bit more in regards to some of the accessories that we have available for Ethernet. So we've already talked about Stride and the different flavors in it. One of the other industrial switches we still sell, Shane's showing it over here, is the ESW05U. That's been around for a while. We actually, I maybe don't want to talk price too much, but I remember when that switch first came out, it was something like $495 at that time. Maybe not that high.
Well, even 272, somebody's going to say
it's
that's
still
expensive compared to a
expensive,
$15 hub
but
that I can go to Radio Shack and purchase.
yeah, but like
Why would I want this,
we
Tom?
always bring up is, you'd use this in an industrial application where you'd have an enclosure out in a factory where it gets hot and it's rugged to withstand the environment and everything.
Yeah, if you look on this one, it can be mounted a couple different ways. It can be screwed to a panel or back plane. Also, it's got on the back, it's a little easier to see there, but it's DIN rail mountable as well. And yeah, this was our first Ethernet, industrial Ethernet switch that we were selling. People were, why should I buy that? Well, of course, we have to give them the switch versus hub, but also the ruggedness. Vibration was one of the biggest killer of hubs. I mean, you can put a standard, Ethernet hub in your cabinet, but if you've got a machine that's hopping around or vibrating or humming, it's gonna come apart. Whereas these are actually made to withstand vibration and high temperature.
And we do carry for those applications where you can use, a simple type Ethernet hub. We do sell that with the cables too.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, I think our customers buy those because they're first getting into our products and they're using, let's say, hopefully the new Productivity 3000 with a Seymour, and they want to set everything up with their PC right there on their desk where they can program both of them and have them connected up with the software and everything. So in those cases, they might use a simple little hub with the cables. Next slide.
Okay, well, this is the PLC Ethernet products. Like I said, we talked about the ECOMs. Now we have up there HX, meaning we have them in, we listed the 05, 06, 205, 405. So the 05 can put one option card in it, so you could put an Ethernet card in it. The 06 actually has 4 option slots, so you could actually put 4 Ethernet cards in there if you wanted to.
Okay.
The HX ERM, so we have the ERM, the Ethernet Remote Masters. You have those for 205 and 405. And then the HX EBC, which, like we said, 205, 405, and Terminator.
Okay, and I think this next slide just gets into, then we'll go through it real quick, but
Sure.
the specifications we're just showing, and all those are also available in I'm sorry, I shouldn't say all of them. The ERMs and the EBCs are also available, and they're not used a lot, but they're available in a fiber optic version also. But we show all the specifications for the ratings on it and throughput and everything.
You can find that on our website there for downloads. Configuration options, you've got a couple of different ways, IPX, TCP/IP, just all kinds of stuff. And you can get heavily into the Ethernet communications protocols, but you've got dip switches you can go in and set up. You can name, give these names.
It's been a while since I've set up one of these. I'm used to setting them up with NetEdit within the software, but I kind of remember at one time you can either software set it up, or as this slide is shown, you can also set the address, which would be the mode address with a dip switch. So
and don't ask me what. I have to break out pen and paper to figure those out. All right, next one, ECOM software configuration option. Like Tom said, NetEdit. And tell you what I'm going to do, guys. If y'all can go ahead.
Switch over to
switch over there.
Camera 4.
Let me see if I can minimize this a little bit so it'll fit. There we go. It's a little bit better. This is our DS launch. You can get that with DirectSoft. And actually, we have the free DirectSoft, right? It's like just a play with it type.
100 instruction version. Yeah.
And so you can actually get this and go out there and play with it. But inside of the DS launch, there's a couple of tools, and one of them is going to be the NetEdit. And we can go here, go to NetEdit, and we're going to open it up, and it actually goes out and sees what we've got here in our office. Now, we unplugged from the company network, so we're not pinging everybody's offices. Would see so many pieces of equipment. But it shows that we've got a 205 EBC, a 205 ECOM, and a 205 ERM. With a NetEdit. Now, NetEdit's only going to show us the direct logic stuff, right? It's not going to see the Productivity 3000. But you can go in and do all kinds of stuff here, make some changes or whatnot. But that's the NetEdit, and it's also a free download if you just want to go get just the NetEdit. Something else we talked about was the ERM Workbench. I'm going to open that up, and so if you're using, this is just comparison of old remote I/O, which that used to be my specialty when I was in tech. versus the Ethernet remote I/O. It was just a walk in the park compared to the old stuff. But open up the workbench, and I say, okay, I'm on a hub. I've got an in my lap, and I've got a EBC right next to me. And we're going to say it's on a hub. Yeah, you sure it's on a hub? Yes, it is. And it says, okay, here's the address found. Well, if I pulled that out, that address would actually be printed on the label on the side.
Okay, it's like a MAC address on a lot
Right,
of the
right.
different equipment.
And also it says you can flash the error light. When I do that, there's an error light on this it actually flashes.
I can see
Okay,
it
I've got
from
the
here.
right one.
Yep.
Hit OK. And it goes out and it says, okay, there you go. Now this is the input you've got, and this is the output you've got. And I'll look over. Sure enough, that's exactly what I've got. And I can either remove something or rescan it. And when I go to the next step, it actually asks me where do I want my inputs and outputs to start at.
This is the part I like. This is really nice.
Yeah, especially the analog, because you can
Yes.
say I want it to start at wherever. Now, if you don't have a manual, you can actually go through and start scrolling up and down, and you notice that I now have my input starting at X400, or I can go back and put them at X300, which is good if you have, say this is my third slave rack, I might want everything starting at 300, the fourth at 400, but you don't have to. And if you're not sure what you've got, PLC memory map, and you select whatever processor you've got, and it'll tell you. And let's say all of our manuals are on the internet as if you don't have one, but I would highly suggest grab a printed manual anytime you grab any of the PLCs.
Yes.
And it says everything, here it is, it's all set up, ready to go. And I can write to the which I've already written to it, so I'm just going to cancel that. But that's Ethernet remote I/O setup. That's
Okay.
it, done. What did that take me, 30 seconds?
Yep.
I'd still be sitting here for a couple hours if I was doing serial remote I/O.
Actually, yeah. Tell you what, let me go to, just real quick, we have a slide in here. Basically, we're showing before the iBoxes. The iBoxes make it a lot simple, but some ladder logic programming that allows communications between devices.
Mhm.
But right after this, I think we get into our little speed demo
Right.
that Shane's going to demonstrate to us. So, whoops, what happened to our speed demo?
Maybe we don't have demo listed, but that's okay.
I think at this point where
Right, we're gonna talk about it right
demonstrate this.
here.
Yeah, then we'll go into the customer application.
Yeah, but like Tom was saying on that one particularly, networking, if you don't have DirectSoft 5, the example on the left-hand side of that slide there, you see you actually got to write some code, so you've got to know where modules are placed at and whatnot, how many, how much you're going to write, how many I/O. With the new iBoxes, you can just do it all in one instruction.
One instruction.
I mean, if I get a chance, I'll show that. All right, back to the DirectSoft real quick. We're at the DS launch, and I've got a couple of links here. Now, just for kicks and fun here, we're going to connect up to our 260 at AutomationTalk, and it's an Ethernet.
You're connecting up how?
Ethernet.
Ethernet? Okay.
Actually, you know what? Let's
back up.
that's all right.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I did some stuff earlier, but tips, if you're not familiar with the DirectSoft 5, it gives you little tips. And I'd say, Bruce Perry, when he comes in here and gives the DirectSoft seminar, he says, take the minute when you get time and go through these. He's like, when DirectSoft 5 first came out, the engineers wrote it. There's a lot of little niches that they know about that a lot of other people didn't know about, and even guys in tech were like, hey, I didn't know you could do that. So go through those when you get a chance. All right, so we have a little program written inside here, and basically what we're going to do is just show you. I'm going to go to debug, all status on. I'm going to go to my PLC and go to link setup, and you can see what up here. Yep, it shows up. We're at 120 some odd.
It's our transfer rate.
Right, per second. 130. And you can see how many transfers we've done. This is basically what means the PLC to the computer is talking, or DirectSoft to the PLC is talking back and forth.
So if we were doing some kind of capturing data or something over
yeah, you
Ethernet,
right.
We wanted the common term is poll.
Sure.
This would show us how fast we could collect that data.
Right. And for instance, say if you're using DataWorks or one of those products like that, yeah, you're pulling a bunch of information, analog information, errors, all kinds of stuff like that, PID, whatever, and you're throwing it in some kind of spreadsheet or database, it's going to hog up the network pretty quick, right?
Right.
So as you can see there, we're in the 120 some odd, And I'm going to exit here, and I'm going to go to PLC and disconnect. Yes. I'm actually going to close this out.
Okay.
Don't save. We're going to come back, and we have serial communications here.
First, you
Yep.
see,
And that's why it's red. It's not plugged in. I'm going to plug in the serial communications, and let's see if it comes up or gives me an error again. Sensing, and it should bring up the same project when it gets around to it. And we can actually go out here and create a new comm link. I wanted to show them how to do that as well.
Okay. Looks like possibly because we had that down.
Yeah, I shouldn't have never unplugged it, but our IT guy was in here messing with the computer right before the
Whoops.
show.
Be careful, our IT guys. Going to engineering too.
Yeah, that's all right. No, we don't want to tell Microsoft about it. It's not any of their problems.
No.
Let me try this real quick. Actually, I wanted to show them how to create
A link?
a link. So let's see if
Okay.
we can create a link. Man, our IT guy must have killed my computer. Tell you what, let's
Tell you
ignore
what,
that.
let's jump over to the
What I was going to show though, Tom, is earlier, you know, we showed there was 130 transfers per second, right? If
that
I
was
went in
through Ethernet.
yes, with Ethernet. If I went in with the same connection, serial, basically same PLC, everything. The only difference was I was using serial communications and serial cable, as the transfer rate was like 9 and 10 per second.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's, you know,
Still,
more than
still
10%.
good enough. Still good enough if we're programming stuff, but we got into any kind of high speed, I'll call it, you know, data, trying to capture data and everything. It
Right.
might bottleneck us a little bit.
Right. All right, guys, if you can go back, I've actually pulled up the Productivity 3000. Let me see if I can fit this. Nope. See if I can fit this inside the screen here. So we're using a capture box so everybody can see. There we go. All right, I am offline, and I'm going to go out and look for a pack.
We
That
have
is so
a
tough to say, pack.
PAC versus PLC.
Yep. And it's going out and looking to see what packs are out there.
Looks like you have two choices there.
And if you look and see, let me slide these over just a hair.
Ah, I see. One's a USB connection, which
Right.
we do have a USB cable plugged up between the PC and the PAC.
Which is cool because the Productivity 3000 has USB connectivity. I mean, everything's going USB, pen drives, everything else. USB, right?
Right.
Well, I'm not positive, but I have not seen any other PLCs with USB connectivity.
Neither have I.
But you can plug directly from your PC to the Productivity 3000 with USB, connect up, and you can program it like that. Or if you want to use Ethernet, it's built in, so I can select that as well. And you can go in and make changes to whatever you want to with it as well. And we'll open up, and hey, look, I'm online with it with USB because I just like to use USB. It's so easy.
Since we're on the PAC, you know, so we talked about the 7 ports on PAC and jumping around a little bit here, but you know, the whole talk show today is in regards to Ethernet. Real quick, wanted to explain again on the Productivity 3000 on the CPU. We can do Ethernet for our communications, but we also use Ethernet for our local I/O expansion, so we can actually take from the base from the CPU and go to a remote slave unit with Ethernet cable again. And then also should mention on the PAC, since we talked about USB, we can also do local remote with USB type cabling. And
Something else, what's in front of you there, Tom? We didn't talk about those at all.
our little panel.
We didn't have these
Yeah,
on the
one
slides,
too.
but since we're talking about everything Ethernet,
RJ45. We also have some bulkhead type panel connectors we can use that are waterproof and stuff and everything. And we can, let me bring this one over here too. But with these, you know, we can, if you have Ethernet, inside your cabinet. You can bring these on the outside, so if you want to plug up with a laptop with Ethernet capability, you can do that to program the units and everything.
Cool. I just wait for the day that they start selling some FireWire ones, because that's what we use here in
For our
the
video.
world is FireWire and USB, but FireWire is even faster. All right, we're going to go ahead, and we've got a couple of customer examples. Like I said, we haven't done that in a while. So the first one is American Boa. They actually are around the corner here from us in Cumming, Georgia. And what they do is they make a lot of metal piping, flexible piping. Some of it's for the auto industry. It's pretty cool stuff. But what they had here was a test stand that ran through, test the pipes. And what they had was a local PLC, and it would run batch test. And used to, what would happen is say every hour, one of the managers would have to run out there with a clipboard and get all the information. And then they updated that, and they could have to run out there and, collect the data from the system. But they could do it with digital data, CD or USB pen drive. Well, then what they did was they updated it, and they installed Ethernet, and they were able to run the Ethernet from the test panel back into the office, and they used DataWorks, which we sell here. And with DataWorks, they're able to sit anywhere in the office and pull all the batch testing and see what's going on and make sure that all the products are okay. Like I said, the old way, actually, they had to run out there with a laptop and get the information every hour.
I can imagine that was a pain. But,
yeah. So this saved them a lot of time and a lot of money. And then anybody, if Joe Bob's not there that day, you don't have to worry about him running out there with a laptop, because that's his laptop, and he's the only one who has to connect up to it. Now, if he's not there, anybody can go in and pull the spreadsheets and look at the data.
Cool.
Okay. The next one we've got is the Lockhart
Easy for you to say.
Power Hydroelectric Plant. Now, what this one was is they were revamping the power plant, and what they did was when they revamped it, they had different locations upstream and downstream, and they needed to turn on different stations as they were revamped or remachined, retooled.
Okay.
And they added Ethernet and were able to communicate with HMIs on all the Ethernet, and they had HMIs that would actually go in and they could select, okay, we want to turn off this one until it's redone, until it's retooled. And once it was all retooled, then they could just use that same HMI and actually turn on the next, power up the next section of the plant. So that saved them a lot. They didn't have to worry about enabling, disabling, unwiring, wiring, whatnot, but they could just do it all through the HMI with Ethernet communications. Okay. Like I said, the PLC links were already all there. They were already all available, and it was like a seamless operation when they were ready to go.
I know we don't show it up there, and we're out of time, and we're at the end of our show today, but one other thing I'd like to mention real quick, I'm kind of plugging for the Productivity 3000, but besides using an Ethernet type cable for remote slave type I/O, also if I could grab it over here and show it, cameraman.
Oh yeah, our E-drives.
Let me do this. One of our E-drives that we can connect up to the GS drive or a Durapulse drive, the pack, or I should say the Productivity 3000 also has the ability to run an Ethernet cable from the one plug here. This is actually RS485 that goes to the drive, but we can hang up to, I think it's 64 GS type drives off of these E-drive interface cards, and auto configure them directly from the software, the Productivity 3000 software. So just another one of our Ethernet abilities and features, and I think that concludes everything I had to say at this point.
Yeah, what's our next slide, Tom?
I think this is our
Q&A. All right.
Q&A time.
Well, I'm going to let Tom look over the computer. Like I said, we swapped sides for this seminar, and if you have any questions, if not, I know we had some people that asked prior to the show. When you sign up, you're able to ask some questions or tell us some stuff you wanted to see. Tom, you see anything over there as far as questions?
I don't see any, but here's some that I think have come up over the years or, lately. First question I have, can there be multiple ECOMs in one base with just one PLC CPU?
Yeah, you can. I forget exactly what the limitations are, but you can have multiples. Especially if you're doing like, master to slave, PLC to PLC communications, you might want to tag that on its own little network and then have another ECOM and use that ECOM for, say, communicating to the PC. So if you isolate your network, especially with like the Ethernet remote stuff, the ERM and the EBCs,
Okay.
you want to isolate your networks. We didn't mention that earlier. You don't really want to have your Ethernet remote stuff on the same network as the rest of the plant. I mean, it'll work, but it's not
Right.
suggested. You can't hog up a lot of data. You can slow everything down, bottleneck. But so yeah, if you want some faster communications, you want to isolate your networks. Yeah, put multiple ECOMs, and one ECOM going to one set or one ECOM going to another.
Okay, cool. I think we just answered this question. Can the Direct Logic PLC ECOM connect to VFDs? And the answer is no, but with the eDrive interface card and an ERM module through a switch, we can communicate that way. So I've already answered the question. Let's see, one more. We have time for one more question.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a simple one or not. How do you connect EBCs to PLCs for Ethernet remote I/O? I think you covered that, but
Yeah.
So that one's covered.
No, I'll mention it again. What was the question? EBCs to
To PLCs for Ethernet remote I/O.
use an ERM.
Okay. Yep. Exactly.
And ERMs, like I said, ERMs are the best of the remote I/O stuff with 205, 405, and depending on what you want your slave. With the Productivity 3000, you already have
That built into it.
It's remote I/O, but it's actually, like Tom said, it's Ethernet remote I/O. It's just a little bit different communications, but it takes a standard Ethernet cable. The remote I/O is already built into the processor. You don't have to buy any extra modules. It's already there. So when you buy the processor, you get the free remote I/O, whether you're going to use it or not. But take advantage of it. Yeah, just Ethernet communications straight to the slave rack.
Very good. Very good.
All right, well, we'll stop with questions there. But if you have any more, go ahead and ask away, and we'll always answer you via email. Information resources, like I said, there's a lot of stuff on the internet. Went out there and looked.
Okay, we're gonna send up a follow-up.
Yeah, don't worry about jotting these down. These will be in the email saying thanks for coming in. But the IEEE Institute stuff, there's the Industrial Ethernet book.
We have a lot of information
Yes.
online that'll
Yes,
help
there's
you
some
too.
nice Ethernet manuals that we cover. And if you don't want to purchase a printed one, you can go out and get a free one off of our website.
Exactly.
And our last slide, and if I can get our engineers to wrap everything up on their end back there behind the studio desk. We thank everybody for coming in and watching today. I see that we had a good crowd, and we thank Tom for coming in and helping me out with this again.
Thank
like
you,
I said,
Shane.
we tag team these, and we have a lot of fun. Can't find a better job. Let me see if I can find the ending here. Okay, thanks for coming in, and hope you learned something. Please make sure you check out the website. We've got some seminars lined up for the rest of the year. Feel free to browse our site, shop for our industry leading catalog, take a look at all of our websites. We have a lot of websites down here at Automation Direct. Keep us in mind for all your automation needs, and like I said, sign up for the rest of the Automation Talk web seminars we've got posted through December. Let me offer that we do have the Learn site, and we're going to take some of this stuff and dive in a little bit deeper on the Learn site. So if this isn't enough technical, don't worry, this is just sort of skim the top of it, and Tom and I'll do some Ethernet videos.
Specific.
Right, some Pacific ones, real soon. But you can find that at learn.automationdirect.com. Questions and comments can be sent to me via email at live@automationdirect.com. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.